Good evening and welcome to the November 15th, 2023 South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners meeting. I will call this meeting to order. We do have all commissioners present this evening. At this time, I would ask you to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to announce that all public sessions of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners are electronically recorded, filed, and posted on our website for public access. At this time, I'll ask our Township Manager to please review our public virtual meeting rules.
Thank you. The public virtual meeting rules are as follows. Courtesy of the floor for non-agenda items will be at the beginning and end of the agenda. Public comment will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. For all listed agenda items, the board president will call for courtesy of the floor prior to the Board of Commissioners taking action on that specific agenda item. For in-person attendees, please raise your hand to be recognized, then move to the podium when directed. You will be asked to state your name and address for the record and may then proceed with asking your question. For those participating virtually, please mute your microphone or telephone to avoid any background noise that may cause interference during the meeting. The chat box feature will be active throughout the meeting. If you have a comment or question, please type your full name and address into the chat box. The staff member monitoring GoToMeeting will then unmute your microphone and you will have the opportunity to comment or ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'd also like to announce the Board of Commissioners met in executive session prior to tonight's meeting to discuss legal and personnel matters. Moving on to agenda item 4, courtesy of the floor. This is opportunity for a member of the public to approach the board with comment on any non-agenda items. Is there anyone present this evening who'd like to address the board? Is there anyone online? Okay, hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to presentations. Tonight we have the second reading of the 2024 proposed budget. I'll ask our Director of Finance, Tricia Dickert, to please present.
Good evening, Commissioners. So today we'll just go through the second reading of the 2024 proposed budget, similar to what we did on the 1st of November. And again, all of this was driven by a productive workshop meeting that we had in this very room on October 26th. So for general fund, the expected revenues for 2024 are $19,788,338. And the same in expenses. This represents approximately 11% increase on both sides. For the fire fund, the revenues being projected are $1,372,000, which is approximately a 2.8% increase from 2023, and expenses of $878,000, which is an increase of approximately 0.9%. For the water fund, revenues for 2024 are being projected at $4,870,500, which is approximately an 8% increase over 2023, and expenses at $4,363,11, which is an increase of approximately 6.8%. For the sewer fund, revenues totaling $4,169,258, which is also a 6.5% increase from 2023, and expenses of $4,130,264, which is an increase of approximately 8.6% from 2023. The refuse fund, expecting revenues of $5,022,240, which is an increase of 71.5% over 2023. And expenses of $4,516,467, which is an increase of approximately 50% from 2023. For state highway aid, the revenues being projected are $726,270. The expenses being projected are $807,000. On the revenue side, it's approximately 1.7% increase from 2023. And on the expense side, it's an increase of approximately 4.6%. For the open space fund, the revenues being projected are $102,467. This is approximately a 29.4% decrease from 2023. and expenses of $214,034, which is an increase of approximately 67.9% from 2023. The ARPA fund, there's $673,606.27 remaining in the ARPA fund account. And in your capital request packet, you'll see a capital request has been submitted for your consideration for the purchase of in-car and body cameras for the police department. That cost is funded in part by grants and in part by the balance that remains in the ARPA fund. And then just a reminder, we're obligated to commit those monies and to spend all of that ARPA money by the end of 2024. Debt service fund, the total of debt payments for 2024 is $1,064,101. And of that, $665,001 is principal and $399,100 is interest. And for the capital requests, I'll go over this one a little bit more detailed. It's really just going to be me reading what's on the memo, but I think the information is useful because it helps draw a roadmap of how capital gets funded. So we'll just go over those figures. So for 2024, the board has been submitted with $5,645,399.07 in capital projects for your review and for your consideration. Keeping in mind that when capital is submitted, there are several funding sources, so I'll just read through those from this sheet. For 2024, the capital funding sources are as follows: $2,001,814 in grant revenue, $673,606.27 as an interfund transfer from ARPA. Again, that's the balance that I just read off was remaining in the ARPA fund that we're required to commit by the end of 24. From the debt fund, an interfund transfer of $294,124.80. From the campus reno fund, a transfer of $63,827.65. And interfund transfer from open space of $214,034. An interfund transfer from general of $1,641,066.01. And from the cash carry forward of existing monies sitting in the capital fund, $756,926.35 would go towards funding the $5 million in capital projects that were put before you in the capital request packet. So with that said, if anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Thank you, Tricia. And I want to again thank staff and administration for preparing and presenting this balanced budget to the board for consideration. Are there any comments or questions from the board on the budget reading? Are there any from the public? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And just to note, the proposed budget is posted to the Township website for public access. Moving on to our meeting minutes, agenda item 5 from our November 1st, 2023 Board of Commissioners meeting. They've been distributed to the board. Does anyone have any comments or questions? May I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion. Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to ordinances, ordinance 6A for possible adoption, consideration for approval of advertisement of said ordinance. An ordinance of the Township of South Whitehall, County of Lehigh, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, amending Part 2 General Legislation, Chapter 336, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 4, General Parking Regulations of the Codified Ordinances of South Whitehall Township to amend Section 336-33, Parking Prohibited at All Times in Certain Locations, to provide for a parking prohibition located at 18th Street North on the east side of the street between the property known as 1525 North 18th Street, extending from the southeast corner of Stanley and North 18th Street for a distance of approximately 78 feet south to the northern side of the driveway established for this property, and to provide for a repealer clause, retention of rights to enforce, severability clause, and an effective date. I will ask our Township Manager, Tom Petrucci, to present.
Thank you. So to give us some background on this ordinance, during the October 4th regular meeting, the Board of Commissioners authorized moving forward with advertising the ordinance. The ordinance was advertised in the November 1st issue of the Parkland Press and was sent to the Lehigh County Department of Law on October 26th. Following adoption, if the board is inclined to pass this ordinance, the township will move forward with installing revised signage as required to effectuate the ordinance. And I will note that no comments were received from the public on this ordinance, so it asks for a motion to adopt.
Excellent, Tom. Thank you. Are there any board questions on this ordinance? Any public comment? Do I have a motion to adopt said ordinance? I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Tom. Ordinance 6B for direction and discussion. We have an ordinance amending zoning ordinance section 350-42E, fences and retaining walls, to require a zoning permit for all fences and retaining walls. And I will ask our planner, Greg Adams, to present.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
The current section of the zoning ordinance regarding fences stipulates that fences 4 feet in height and under do not require a permit. Staff has noticed that a number of small fences have appeared within clear sight triangles of intersections, on township easements, and within township right-of-way. Staff requests that the requirement for fences to secure a permit be extended to all fences so that such issues may be caught before the fence is installed. This was a prior ordinance amendment proposed. This was originally proposed with Zoning Ordinance Service Pack C, which the Planning Commission recommended for approval at their December 15th, 2022 meeting. Since that meeting, staff has recommended a further number of changes to the language, the extent of which I believe the ordinance should be returned to Planning Commission for their comments. So some of these changes, including clarifying the need for building permits in certain situations, to add the clear sight triangle requirements for proposed fence locations, to remove the exemptions to the requirement of the zoning permit, and to add a requirement for PA1 call and clear marking of the fence a location prior to installation. So this is the language that is proposed in the packet. Once, of course, it goes to the Planning Commission, they will review it, legal will review it as part of that, and then if it moves forward, we will bring it back to you.
Very good, Greg. Thank you. Are there any board comments or questions on this proposed? Yes, Commissioner Osborne.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Greg, does this ordinance address the pre-existing locations where fences may be in violation of this ordinance, but prior to its, if it is implemented?
If they had been approved by the township, they would become a legal nonconformity prior approval, of course. If the fence were then changed at some point in the future, they would have to adhere to the regulations at that point. But if it was previously approved, it would be in a sense grandfathered. Am I correct on that, Joe?
Absolutely. And the only thing I would add, if the fence is old enough that it predates zoning altogether, or at least this kind of regulation of zoning as to fences, then it would be non-conforming as well.
What if a fence exists that wasn't pre-approved and would be in violation of this ordinance?
Then if it were brought to our attention, then it would have to, undergo the review. And if it did not meet the regulations at that time, it would have to be dealt with. I would imagine it would have to be moved into compliance.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board comments or questions?
I do have a
Commissioner?
question. Greg, you probably know this. I don't. Are surveys required for fence placement?
Surveys are not required. However, they are encouraged.
Thank
Any other board comment? Any public comment? Do I have a motion to send said ordinance to the Planning Commission and legal for review?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, staff, for bringing that to our attention. On to agenda item 6C, we have an ordinance of the Township of South Whitehall, County of Lehigh, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, fixing the property tax rate for the fiscal year 2024, levying a real estate tax for general revenue purposes and for fire tax purposes for the fiscal year 2024, reaffirming the current tax rates provided for within Chapter 328 taxation of the codified ordinances of South Whitehall Township, and appropriating specific sums estimated to be required for the specific purposes of the township government during the 2024 fiscal year, providing for a repealer, severability clause, and effective date. And Tom, if you'd please present.
Thank you. So the first class township code requires the Board of Commissioners to fix the property rate for the 2024 fiscal year in conjunction with the approval of the 2024 annual budget. Each year, the township must pass an ordinance, or in some cases, a resolution to adopt the property tax rate. In this case, the proposed ordinance effectuates the revenue forecasts that were set forth in the 24 budget, mostly derived from real estate property taxes. So the rates are as follows. For general township purposes, the millage is 2.849750. For fire tax purposes, it's 0.47, so the total is 3.319975. So this ordinance accomplishes the first class township code requirement. It also reaffirms the current local tax rates that are in effect in Chapter 328, entitled Taxation of the Codified Ordinances of South Whitehall. Under the Local Tax Enabling Act, you don't really adopt those or change those each year. They're in effect already. But the property tax has to be set each year. So I would respectfully request to advertise this ordinance with a targeted adoption date for December 6th, which is also the same date of the adoption of the budget.
Very good, Tom. Thank you. And to clarify, there will be no increase in the tax rate or the fire tax.
Correct.
Correct. Very good. Are there any commissioner comments or questions on said ordinance? Any public comment? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to proceed with advertising of said ordinance?
I'll second that.
Motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Tom. Moving on to resolutions. 7A, we have a resolution granting final approval to a major plan entitled Ridge Farms Phase 1B. I'll ask our planner, Greg Adams, to please present.
Thank you. This is an application to develop the properties located at 1802 North Cedar Crest Boulevard, which is the northwest corner of the Walbert Avenue Cedar Crest Boulevard intersection. The plan proposes 5 apartment buildings containing a total of 60 units, not 6, 14 two-unit dwelling units, which is 7 pairs of twins, and a single dwelling. Also proposes the continuation of Yellowstone Road eminent its intersection with Cedar Crest Boulevard, and a portion of Road H, the basins 3 and 4, and their associated stormwater management facilities, all on a 13.2 acre portion of the 31.9644 acre tract. At their September 21st, 2023 meeting, the Planning Commission reviewed and recommended final plan approval to Ridge Farm Final Plan Phase 1B to the Board of Commissioners, subject to the applicant complying with 27 conditions on a vote of 3-2 with 1 abstention. I'd like to mention 2 procedural points. 1, the acceptance of conditions has not yet been received. The applicant shall submit the signed acceptance of conditions before the commissioners vote on the approving resolution. And 2, the deadline for the Board of Commissioners to act on the plan is November 30th. Should the Board of Commissioners not grant final plan approval at this meeting, a signed waiver of time limitation to review the plan will be required from the applicant. Otherwise, the applicant's team is present to answer questions.
Thank you, Greg. Could I just ask you to turn on the microphone? Just press the button, the green light will come on.
You got it.
Excellent.
We good? Okay, thank you. Good evening, Jim Preston. I'm the attorney for the applicant. This is Jason Engelhardt. Most of you know him. He's the project engineer and has been the project engineer throughout. I just want to comment on one thing about the acceptance of conditions. I believe we had 2 resolutions in the alternative. So we haven't accepted the conditions because we don't know what the conditions are at this point, but we'll be happy, I think, to accept them, at least with respect to one of those resolutions. Very good. Now, I don't want us to appear to be recalcitrant or somehow not willing to do that. So We're here seeking an approval in accordance with the Planning Commission's recommendation. I'm not sure how you would like to proceed. Would you like an overview? Jason can go through that. If you don't want us to do that, we won't. We'll follow whatever it is that you would suggest in terms of the plan reviewing.
Well, we've certainly have the details of the plan in our agenda packet. Is any member of the Board of Commissioners interested or needs to have further explanation from the developer? No, I don't think we need to.
Okay, then we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Very good. Are there any questions, first of all, before I move forward? I did want to ask our solicitor to please just, if you would give us an overview of the process for conditional use and what's before us this evening.
I'd be glad to, Commissioner Kelly. For the benefit of the public, commissioners, everyone present, land use in general has two broad categories, all governed by the municipality's planning code. Those categories are zoning and land development and subdivision. And first, from a zoning perspective, this application has gone through the conditional use process required of this type of development in South Whitehall Township. That conditional use was the subject of a hearing that occurred in November of 2019. At that time, the Board of Commissioners gave conditional use approval to the Ridge Farm project. It was an approval of the use. There was a formal public hearing. There was an opportunity for public comment. I would note that from a legal standpoint, at a conditional use hearing, by and large, it's not a matter of discretion. The ordinance establishes criteria that need to be met. And if those objective criteria are met, and with little exception, there's an obligation on the officials in that case to grant approval. And that's what happened here. So there was a conditional use approval that occurred in 2019. And the current board is bound by that decision from 2019. The second prong of land use is land development and subdivision. That's really why we're here this evening. This phase 1B of the project it has gone through a process that's involved quite a few planning commission reviews by the township engineer. Ordinarily with a project of any magnitude such as this, it takes months, sometimes years. And the review process is extensive. It includes review by the township staff, the township engineer, the traffic consultant, which may or may not be in the office of the township engineer, the lighting consultant, the Public Works Department, the Shade Tree Commission, the Public Safety Commission, the Planning Commission, perhaps others. It's a lengthy process, a detailed process. Should there be any legal issues that arise during that process, the solicitor's office would review that. In addition, there are outside agency approvals and permits that are necessary. PennDOT is a prime example here. The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, the Lehigh County Conservation District, and depending on the project, there could be others. It's necessary that zoning approvals be obtained prior to an effective final approval for a land development plan. And as I said, in this case, that was the conditional use, and that's occurred. Sometimes, particularly with larger projects, there'll be phasing of a project. And the rationale behind phasing is severalfold. It takes a large project and breaks it up into more manageable pieces, whether it be from a developer standpoint, taking it to predicted absorption in the sales of homes or the expected progress of developing non-residential office buildings, medical office buildings, restaurants, retail, the absorption of those. Basically, it also spreads out typically the construction of infrastructure, roads, piping systems for utilities and the like. So tonight we're here regarding phase 1B. It's gone through that necessary process. Most approvals are always given subject to conditions. With a significantly sized project, there could be many conditions. And as Greg pointed out, there are, I think he said 27 conditions in the recommendation for approval from the Township Planning Commission. Those conditions are typically things like outside agency permits and approvals being received, meeting the requirements of the various review letters, and I outlined the organizations that typically would have review letters. dedication of necessary easements, road rights of way, completing security, and ultimately signing developers agreements. The list goes on. But those are the kind of things that are typical with a land development process. If those requirements are met, again, there's an obligation on a municipality to grant approval. In fact, if you're a developer, they typically don't refer to it as getting your approvals, they refer to it as your entitlements. That's the way the process tends to be structured. So that's why we're here tonight. That's the process this evening. And as Mr. Adams has indicated, there's resolutions. Mr. Preston has indicated there are two different resolutions. And with that said, I will turn it back to President Kelly.
Thank you, Attorney Zader. I'd also like to ask our township engineer, Tony Talrida, if you have any engineering comments or summary regarding the project.
Sure, thank you. So as was mentioned, this project's on the west side of Cedar Crest Boulevard, north of Walbert Avenue. 60 total units in the 5 apartment buildings, 14 twin units in 7 buildings, and an existing building to remain. They're also doing safety improvements on the roadway near the park on Chalmette Drive. They also have an associated roadway improvements based upon PennDOT's recommendations. It is phase 2 improvements, which include all remaining HOP improvements that were originally presented. It is work on the west side of Walbert Avenue, work on Cedar Crest north of Huckleberry the whole way down to the Route 22 interchange. There's some work on Ridgeview 309 and some minor signal timings in between. It also includes a temporary traffic light at Brandywine and Walbert. Now, the temporary traffic light is to remain in place until the internal roadway network connects to Huckleberry Road. So that will be in place, but it is temporary. The improvements themselves will be built as the second phase is done, and it's in essence overbuilding the roadways, as all the units are not going to be built at the time the roadway will be done. Therefore, when analysis was done, that mentions that once the improvements on Walbert Avenue west of Cedar Crest, along with the temporary signals in place, they can begin to occupy those buildings. That being said, there will be security posted for all the remaining roadway improvements through PennDOT, so the roadway will be secured and can be built if something happens. But that being said, they have been through multiple submissions prior to this point, prior to the recommendation of the Planning Commission, and at this point, based upon the comments that are left, we feel that they can receive a recommendation for engineer approval from our office.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Thanks.
I'll open it up to the board if there's any comments or questions for the developer at this point. Commissioner Osborne.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. So I'll address this to Attorney Preston. Our solicitor even used the word entitlement, but my question is this. Attorney Preston, this project has had a lengthy history, as you know, we all know.
Yes.
Why should our board approve this resolution this evening? What entitles you to have that approval?
Commissioner Osborne, I believe it's the fact that the project has been reviewed for compliance and compatibility with the existing ordinances. So the existing ordinances and prior approvals combined. It's the existing ordinance and the prior approvals, because the prior approvals contain numerous conditions and so forth. We present a plan which we hope meets all those ordinances and conditions. We don't always get it right. That, Tony looks at it, Greg looks at it, Joe looks at it, and there's a call and response over a period of time till we get to the point where the township staff believes and can confirm that we are in compliance with the governing ordinances and the conditions that apply to this project. So that's the genesis of the entitlement. It's sort of the project gets scrubbed down for compliance with those requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
My only comment isn't a question, it's a comment. In looking through the materials, in reviewing what we're being asked to consider and vote on tonight, for me, here's the bottom line. we are required and bound, we are required to and bound by the conditional use decision of the previous Board of Commissioners, November 20th, 2019, and all of the decisions prior to that contained within the conditional use, the application for conditional use granted in November of 2019. Reviewing the materials, for me, that's the bottom line. That's what we're being asked to approve this evening.
Thank you. I had a question for the developer. I had a question regarding the township lighting consultant regarding lights on Harvest Way. Your plan was not in compliance with township ordinance on that particular issue. And I was wanting to ask the board's opinion on this as well, if we wanted to ask the applicant to comply with the township standards for lights on Harvest Way.
So the review of the lighting along Harvest Way was one where initially the township's lighting consultant actually verified that we were in compliance. And I understand, and Mr. Adams can probably offer some more feedback, that there was a new interpretation of how you apply your ordinance that would suggest that we would have to light all of Harvest Way more brightly than what was originally envisioned. And I think there's a description in Mr. Adams's review that describes what the township's previous opinion was and what the planning commission recommended, which was plan in front of me right now, but basically we have lighting at either end of Harvest Way, and there's apartment units along the frontage of Harvest. So each one of those will have some lighting from the unit itself. So if you were to put street lights along Harvest Way as well, which is at your discretion, of course, if that's something you wanted, you would potentially have lighting into the windows of those units. And I think the planning commission views that as would be overlit along that street. So it's really, and I'd ask Mr. Adams to kind of fill in the blanks a little bit of the opinion there.
Essentially, he's correct. Township policy, for as long as I've been here, was to light the intersections for safety, but mid-block, especially in residential neighborhoods, to rely on the ambient lighting that the houses themselves put out. And that way we're not overlighting a neighborhood. We also, at the same time, have an application process that if a neighborhood feels they have a certain area that needs more street lighting, they can approach the board, petition for street lights to be put in. And from what I've seen, the board acquiesces, goes along with that opinion, and has the street lights installed. So it's kind of leaving it up to the neighborhood if they feel safe on their own streets with the lesser lighting at mid-block, or if they prefer, more lighting at the mid-block level. Then they can come in, petition the board, and get that. So that has been the policy for as long as I've been here, 20 plus years. It seems to have worked. So when the lighting consultant came in with this, we basically put it to the planning commission. How do you think this should be done? Planning commission didn't give us a clear recommendation, but they did basically say for this situation, they would prefer to continue with the township policy as it has been.
Of course.
We really don't have a dog in that fight. We'll do it however the township wants it done. I think it appears this way in your materials because we're following the guidance that we got from the planning commission. We're not asking to be excused of any obligation. So whatever the board decides, that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to mirror that, I think staff would like a recommendation from you as to whether we should continue that policy, or in Mr. Engelhardt's words, go with the new interpretation of the lighting ordinance.
Well, for me personally, that's a connector street to Cedar Crest Boulevard. I certainly think good lighting would be a positive for public safety and safe travel, but I don't know if our township manager had any comment regarding moving forward with this type of vision.
My question was actually going to be to the police department. what would you generally recommend for lighting? Or do you see any, nexus between increased lighting or lack of lighting and crime statistics?
Yeah, I think to properly give a good answer on that would be essentially we'd have to have the structure built, the infrastructure there, and actually do an assessment of the actual lighting at the time. Just like you said, if you overlight it, it prevents crime, absolutely crime. The lighting situation is definitely a SEPTED issue for the crime prevention through environmental design, which I'm sure all the engineers do that built into their process. But we would have to actually see what the lighting process is at the time to make it a true evaluation of it. Certainly light helps 100%. We believe that light, but again, if you're living in that neighborhood, if you overlight it, it's not a good thing either. So there's a happy balance there somewhere, but we'd have to see it in place to be able to give a good, true evaluation.
And the township would retain the right to call in the lighting at a later date. Is that accurate?
I guess that was the discussion we were having. Since these will be on private streets, I would imagine that the neighborhood would have to make the petition to the HOA first, because obviously it would be their streets under their control.
Go to PennDOT for that. I mean, to PP&L to make the request.
How long would that process take if they find that they do want the lights? Is it a long, drawn-out process?
Several months.
Several months, yes, till PP&L would get the lights in, get them put in, go through the request first. It could be a little lengthy.
That was one of my questions too, Corey Trumbauer's comments on that. And I was wondering if you knew what your lighting is like on the front of your apartment buildings, if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, let me just offer one comment as we're came up to offer it before I forget here. The lighting standards that Corey mentioned, I think the way to think of that is that if you were to follow those standards verbatim, you'd be lighting that roadway like a parking lot, like a shopping center parking lot. So if you envision that and then windows facing that street, and the way that TND design is, you're fairly close to the street where you design that. You'd have a lot of light into those windows, but it'll be a very bright street. Right now, I'm looking at the lighting plan. There are 3 main fixtures along that Harvest Way, and then there's some low-level lighting along the frontage of Cedar Crest Boulevard. So again, I don't disagree with Mr. Preston. We will do whatever the board requires of us. But I would strongly recommend that it's too much light based on that standard, which would basically light this like a shopping center parking lot.
Is there a way to put in the lighting so that it deflects, that it's not going into the homes?
There's shields, there's things you could do, but it won't change the overall level of brightness, which will be out of character for that whole neighborhood or surrounding. Right, so you're already going to have a apartment complex that'll have some level of density and some light already from it. I don't know that I can answer the specific fixtures. There'll be lighting at the entryway of each unit along that frontage of that road. So there'll be a decent amount of ambient light just from those units. But I don't know how to measure that for you now. I don't know specifically what the lighting will be.
Right. I'm thinking of some of our neighborhoods right now. I'm thinking Penn's Crossing and Barrington. Just recently, there have been lights that have been out of service. There have been outages. And you would think that because the homes are big and most of them are lit in the front, they have the torches in the front, that you would have sufficient light from that, but it gets really dark. And especially if this is a more dense unit, I would think that more light would be safer. I don't know if there's any type of way to maybe use less lumens or like a shade or something like that, but I would think that I would want it more lit.
So what's different here is these are also LED fixtures, right? Newer LED fixtures, so they're going to be brighter than you would otherwise think. And they're not single family homes, right? They're 60 apartment units in total, so each unit or two is going to have lighting along the frontage. So there is a compromise too, where we could add a couple more fixtures along that roadway, but without lighting. My concern is not adding a couple fixtures. Again, the developer is not concerned about that either. My concern is overlighting that to the level of a shopping center.
So you would be agreeable to adding different lights along the way a lot
Yeah,
rather than
yeah,
the
I
big
guess
light?
what I'm saying is
Okay.
if you were to do that, like when I looked at this, when I first saw this comment, I said, okay, I talked to my lighting expert in my office. I said, what would we do here? He said, well, we could probably add two lights, maybe even 3 lights along the roadway. But if we were to do this to the level that was noted in Corey's response, and I don't think he was offering an opinion, he was just saying this is what his interpretation of the ordinance is. It really will look like Press Plaza. It'll be like that parking lot. I don't think that's really, again, my recommendation. That's too much like.
From a procedural standpoint, I just want to make sure this is clear because I understand the concerns about overlighting, and I also understand the concerns with not enough lighting. From what Greg said, and just correct me if I'm wrong here, there is a remedy for the residents if they want additional lighting at that time. And my question is, if they were to petition the board at the time, you wouldn't see any hurdles that we would face as a board in approving that. It would be a fairly straightforward process.
Right, were this be a public street, they would approach the board. In this case, they would have to approach the HOA. Once again, it's a neighborhood. If the HOA, there is, I don't
There's a
see.
concern among the neighbors in the neighborhood that also those neighbors constitute oftentimes the HOA.
Yes.
You would assume that it would be a shared concern and they could handle it internally and there'd be no problem with it.
You would assume that, however.
HOAs can be difficult depending
exactly.
on.
Yeah, they're mini governments. So
yeah, absolutely.
Characters are everything there.
Yeah.
But yes, they would have, I would guess, the right to petition their HOA, and the HOA would then go through PPL, design it. They would be installed at, I believe, the HOA's or PPL's expense, but the electrical.
It would
Yeah.
be outside of the
We would have
township.
electrical.
The way I look at this, and it's a more of a micro level issue, but if we approve the plan as proposed, with I don't want to say the bare minimum lighting, but with less lighting than what we might prefer, there's always the option to add lighting. If we approve it with excess lighting, to me, and I'm not an expert in that area, but what's the remedy there besides shields? It's hard to. You're going to remove street lights after you've put them in. That's, you know what I mean? So there's,
Yeah.
That's how I'm thinking.
Yeah, I follow where you're going, and I would agree that there's a certain inertia to everything. So once something gets built, it is harder to remove it than to
just add it in
later.
afterwards.
And if I could just chime in, Chief had talked about the balance, and one of the things that we've talked about during the comp plan and natural resources is dark sky. So that's really what we're talking about, is the ambient lighting affecting the sky. And I believe this has been implemented elsewhere in the project in phase 1A. As far as a safety concern, I think we're primarily talking about pedestrian safety. And I believe that there are pedestrian bollard lights along certain sections of the sidewalks on the other side. So I don't know if that's a balance or a compromise between having additional full height light poles that are going to impact the neighbors, shine lights into windows, to potentially address those mid-block pedestrian lighting.
I just want to do, I think how I understood your question was, if the board approves it the way it's been presented, that does not then lock this in or lock it in. It's just not set in stone. So it doesn't forbid or preclude additional lighting in the future. I think that's what you were asking.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. And any issues that would arise from a lack of lighting could be resolved. There's no barrier to that. That was my question. You're correct.
I'm certainly satisfied with the level of conversation information from all the parties, so thank you. Did you have another comment?
No, I'm okay.
Are there any other board comments on this? At this time, is there any public comment? So do we have a motion to grant final approval to a major plan entitled Ridge Farms Phase 1B as recommended by the Planning Commission?
Before a motion is made, since the motion that's been requested is the same action given by the Planning Commission, Mr. Preston is a developer in a position now to present the acceptance of conditions form for that particular motion.
Yes, yes, we are. And I can do that this evening, and then I can have it signed by Mr. Coase and delivered to the township as well. But I can sign it this evening on his behalf.
Please do. Thank you.
Attorney Zader, are we able to move
Yes,
forward?
ma'am.
Okay, so do we have a motion granting final approval to a major plan entitled Ridge Farms Phase 1B as recommended by the Planning Commission?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Good luck with your phase of this project. Moving on to agenda item 8A, motions. We have a motion to approve animal control services contract for 2024. I'll ask our Township Manager, Tom Pertucci, to please present.
Thank you. So by way of a letter dated October 25th, 2023, the Sanctuary of Hafsville has notified its South Whitehall that they are no longer providing any animal control services to municipalities effective December 31st, 2023. So the Sanctuary, for reference, is not renewing any of their animal control contracts. In other words, this non-renewal is not specific to South Whitehall. Township staff has been able to receive a proposal from the Lehigh County Humane Society to provide these services to South Whitehall, so as not to have an interruption of services in 24. So the contract as proposed by the Humane Society is for stray animal services at the base cost of $4,000, which includes unlimited dogs and 20 cats. And the cost for trap, neuter, and release for cats is $50 per cat. And that would also be capped at 20 cats. So for reference, as a 2023 third quarter billing, the total calls for TNR services with the sanctuary included 5 cats. In the 24 budget, this item is included in the contracted services line item, which is a total of $24,500, with $6,500 allocated towards animal control services. So we will have to monitor to make sure that we stay within budget. But we reviewed other alternatives at this time, and there are none. So at this point, we would respectfully request a motion to approve the one-year contract with the Lehigh County Humane Society. I would also like to thank Township staff, including Donna Zacharu, for ensuring that we secured a timely contract proposal. All municipalities in Lehigh County are in the same boat as the township, trying to make sure that they have animal control services. So Lehigh County Humane Society has actually already approved the township as a client, subject to your approval tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom, and thank you to Donna for your proactive work on behalf of the township. Are there any comments or questions regarding the animal services contract? Commissioner Osborne.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Tom, what is I don't have any problem with what's being proposed. I'll start off with that. But what has been our experience year to date with the need for animal control services? And by numbers, if we have them at all, or microscopically.
Yeah, so I think dogs were somewhere around like 15, 20, somewhere around 15 and 20 without having an exact number. So the issue with animal control is you don't need it until you do, right? So like you have to have someone on board to have that service. We don't have kennels that are approved by the Department of Agriculture. We don't have licensed kennels in that sense, so we wouldn't be able to house these dogs for a long period of time. And we are required as a municipality to follow the dog law. We have to pick up dogs. Cats, there is no cat law, but you know, we still pick them up.
How about cats? What do you have a feel for how many?
We've done about Well, we've done 5 TNRs, and that's only as of the third quarter. I don't think we pick up a lot of cats, quite frankly. They're mostly the trap, neuter, and release. That's how you approach the cats.
Yeah. So the numbers are not extraordinary.
They're
I
not
think
extraordinary.
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Any other board comments or questions?
I just have a quick question. I noted that it said taken as space allows, and probably Chief would be able to answer this. Have we ever been turned away by the Humane Society? Because there are times that you've had to use it, right?
We have not used them in the township, but when I was with the city, we were never turned away.
You were never.
They were very, very good at, because their goal is to save the animals as well and make sure they have a home to go to after they get adopted out if they're not recovered. But they have never turned us away in the city in my time that I was there. So I've got a very good relationship with them, and I'm confident they'll serve the purposes that we need.
Great, thank you.
Excellent.
And I just want to point out, we had to utilize their services for a recent incident. Was able to speak to the director after hours on the spot. So, they are very responsive.
That's a very good report. Thank you. Thank you. There are no other board questions. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Anything online, Dave? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Do I have a motion to approve animal control services contract for 2024?
I'll make a motion.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Motion 8B, we have a motion to enter into an agreement with Jeff Marshall, Open Spaces and Historic Places, LLC, regarding South Whitehall Township Historic Resource Survey. I'll ask our Director of Community Development, Dave Manhart, to present.
Yes, so at the last meeting, we were here to present some findings and asking direction with regards to our landscapes plan, so our open space and historic resources protection plan. We discussed the need and or desire to proceed with a more in-depth historic resource inventory. We reached out to Jeff Marshall, who's our current consultant that has helped with our landscapes plan. He provided the attached scope to complete the historic resource survey. The survey includes model ordinances, so we'll start down the path of getting a historic resource ordinance, enhancing what we have, and potentially adding new incentives into that. And the biggest and probably the most time-consuming piece of this is going through our list. As staff, we've been collecting a list and preparing this list of resources that require further investigation. We've compared lists with the list that he provided as part of the landscapes plan. So we've added more to our list. So we're getting close to 100 resources to identify and work through. So that's probably the part that's going to take the longest. There were some comments at the last meeting regarding timing and timeline. To do a full survey, you're looking at about a year. But what we will do, and it's kind of exponential, like the more detail you want, the longer it's going to take. So as we go through the process, we're looking at ways that we can get to the ordinance part and designating resources that are most important. So we're going to prioritize our list and get that to the board sooner rather than later, and then kind of save some of the more detailed work for later. And that could take as much as a year. So hopefully that's enough information. Any questions?
I just have one. You answered one of my questions with the timeline. And just looking over the agreement, the work that your department will be doing with Jeff over, say, the next year, will that put us in a position by the end of that period, obviously, the development of an ordinance, inventory survey, et cetera. Will that put us in a position then to start acting on some of those items, implementing the ordinance, talking to resource owners, acquiring, preserving in other ways? Or will we have to be back here again with Jeff, for an agreement to work on that? Or is he going to get us to the point where we're sort of self-sufficient on
The
this?
goal is to get us to the point where we are self-sufficient. And again, the timeline, we have to work with him on prioritizing and getting us to that point. And the goal is to get to that point sooner rather than later. And if there's things that are less of a priority, then we can kind of push those off and start looking at, more detail, like looking at pegs and barn beams and things like that.
Excellent. The only question I had, Dave, thank you for that presentation. Do you have an estimate of how many hours you might estimate Jeff would be working on this particular project?
So we put in there not to exceed 20,000. We left it, I think the original, we're projecting 10 to 15. But again, it's kind of dependent on the amount of detail, and there may be something that comes up that's really a high priority that we want that detail. And we have the flexibility in that budget to use that. So that's kind of why the budget and the scope was set at that number.
Understood. Thank you. Any other board questions or comments? Any public comment on this agenda item? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to approve said motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Correspondence and information, boards and commissions. I'll ask Township Manager to please review upcoming meetings and vacancies.
Thank you. So all details of meetings are posted on the Township website. So we have Thursday, November 16th, Planning Commission meeting is canceled. Monday, November 20th, 10 a.m., we have a Landscape Shade Tree Commission meeting. Monday, November 20th, 6 p.m., the Green Advisory Council meeting is canceled. Tuesday, November 21st, 6 p.m., the Crime Watch meeting is going to take place. Wednesday, November 22nd, 7 p.m., the Zoning Hearing Board meeting is canceled. Thursday and Friday, the offices are closed on November 23rd and 24th in observance of the Thanksgiving holiday. Saturday, December 2nd, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., we have our annual tree and bridge lighting at Covered Bridge Park event. Monday, December 4th, 7 p.m. is Public Safety Commission. Wednesday, December 6th, 7 p.m. is Board of Commissioners. Saturday, December 9th, 2023, promptly at 4 p.m., the Candy Cane Hunt and Drive is taking place, which details again are posted on the Township website. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Moving on to agenda item 10, direction and discussion. We have a proposed South Whitehall Township Parks and Recreation Department mission statement, value statement, and program and event evaluation procedure. And I'll ask our Parks and Rec Director, Lynn Matula, to please present.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. With the adoption of the comprehensive Parks and Recreation Plan, staff had the opportunity to reassess our department mission statement and how we select programs and events to ensure that we're meeting the evolving needs of our residents. So using our existing mission statement and the goals and recommendations section of the Parks and Recreation Plan, we revised our mission statement and expanded it to include a value statement, core values, and goals and objectives. Using criteria from our updated mission statement, core values, and the recommendations from the Park and Recreation Plan, we created a scoring matrix. The matrix will allow us to standardize how we evaluate current and new programs and events and help us adhere to our revised mission statement and accomplish our department goals. Programs and events will be scored in each category. The total will determine if the program is in line with our department mission and goals. Additionally, we created a survey to gather program and event feedback, satisfaction levels, and suggestions. The survey is live now and accessible online through the QR code that is in the winter newsletter. There are also links on our website in the Recreation Department pages. We'll be promoting the survey on our social media accounts, website, and with emails through our Recreation portal as well. We will have a paper copy and access to the QR code at the tree and bridge lighting as well. So staff is requesting discussion and direction from the Board of Commissioners for the updated Parks and Recreation Department mission, value statement, core values and objectives, and the program and event evaluation matrix.
Thank you for your presentation, Lynn. I can tell a lot of work has gone into this, very well-defined goals, and I was very thankful to read the matrix. I think it's going to help ensure consistency as we seek to serve the community with Park and Rec programs. So thank you for putting this together and bringing it to the board. I'll open it up to the board for any comments or questions.
Lynn, I have a question. How long do you anticipate this process being open for resident input?
For the survey?
Yes.
We don't have a deadline instituted yet. I'm thinking maybe January, give people time over the holiday. The tree lighting starts at the 2nd, so maybe that's a good kind of big kickoff to it. We want to close it early enough that we can implement that feedback for spring and summer programs. So I would say mid-January at the latest.
Thank you.
Other comments from the board? Public? Okay, hearing and seeing none. It's fantastic. We look forward to seeing the results of the survey and moving forward with new programs.
Thank you. And thank you, Tom, for his suggestion as well.
Thank you, Tom, and staff. Very good. Moving on to agenda item 10B. We have a discussion of Paymentus credit card payment processing upgrades. And we'll ask our Director of Finance, Tricia Dicker, to please.
Okay, hi again. So I find myself in a dilemma. So if you'll give me just a minute, I want to explain what my dilemma is. Kristen and I spent so much time trying to find the perfect words and situating them in this memo that I don't really want to read it to you, but the perfect words are already in here and I don't have another pool of perfect words to give you. So while I know sometimes it's not the best way to present, I really feel like for the record and for the public, the best thing to do is for me to read the memo that Kristen and I drafted.
Perfect.
Okay, so tonight the action being requested is the Finance Department is requesting direction and approval to update our current credit card processing system. These updates would allow for in-person credit card payments for some township bills and would improve the efficiency of the back-end processing of online credit card payments. So just to give you some background information, in 2019, the township began offering online payment options through Paymentus. This started with program fees for Parks and Recreation, and it eventually expanded to include water, sewer, and refuse payments. Earlier this year, we began discussing ways to expand this service and accommodate credit card payments in our lobby. As suggested during the June 16th, 2023 BOC meeting, we contacted Paymentus to see if any upgrades had been made to their system and the way it interfaces with our current ERP, which is Munis, and what fees would be associated with processing those in-person payments. We also expanded that conversation to include how money is deposited into our township account, which currently requires several back-end steps. This conference call took place on October 4th, and I'll explain to you the responses that we received from Paymentus on all of the topics that we touched on during that call. So as far as the Munis interface, during the call, they confirmed that their credit card payment dashboard can communicate with Munis and would real-time post these payments to customer accounts should the township decide to move forward with in-person swipe payments. As for associated fees, Through our conversation with Paymentus, the Paymentus representative, she referenced a visa regulation that she believed excluded fees for processing in-person utility payments. She wanted to take a closer look at what was considered a utility before offering any fee structure amounts. I believe her concern was, what is considered a utility? Is it water? Is it sewer? Is it refuse? Is it some combination of those, or is it all of those? So she wanted to do a little bit more digging behind the scenes to tell us what that would be. After that conversation on October 5th, she confirmed that water, sewer, and refuse will all qualify as utilities and that no collection fees will be charged for in-person payments. We also asked her if there would be any other fees, whether they were percentage-based or otherwise, and she confirmed for us that the fees would still apply to payments made online, because that's a convenience for someone to be able to pay that bill from the comfort of their home, but that none would be passed on to the customer for payments that are actually made in our lobby. She went on to say that the township also would not be charged any money for those payments. As for internal processing, currently when credit card payments are made online, those transactions get retrieved by South Whitehall Township staff in what's called batches. Those batches are what was deposited then into our credit card checking account. Once those are separated by payment types and reconciled, those reconciliations get moved on to me to be posted, and then transfers are made from the checking account to the relevant account in which, how do I say this? Refuse goes to refuse, water goes to water, and sewer goes to sewer. The new user experience would change slightly in that the customer would not be choosing just one utility payment option. The customer would actually be choosing, I want this much to go into my cart for sewer. I want this much to go into my cart for refuse. I want this much to go into my cart for water. So right now what they see is one option. If we make this upgrade, what they'll see is three, and they can actually choose which fund or which bill, I should say, they're looking to apply that money to. On the back end, it would also be updated then so that these fund-specific payments make it directly into the bank account without those transfers having to be done then on the back end. So in summary, the one-time cost of updating our system to accommodate everything that was laid out above is $8,750. This includes the necessary changes to the way the online payments are hitting our account. This includes the EMV device, which we would know as the swipe machine at the counter, and all configuration that needs to be done on the Paymentus side. We've also asked Paymentus to give us some information and some pricing on a kiosk. So I'm just going to break from my reading this and just explain what that would mean and what we've asked them. We were actually hoping we would have a response from them today and we would have some additional information to provide. So what we've asked them is we've asked them a little bit more about their kiosk. What this means is, could there be a kiosk in the lobby where someone could come in and go right to the kiosk and use that piece of equipment to make their payment without having to, let's say, wait in line for the cashier if, she has a line. What we're not sure, though, is making that payment at the kiosk still considered an in-person swipe, or is that then considered a convenience and thereby levied a convenience fee? Let's be realistic. If I'm going to get charged a convenience fee, I'm probably just going to stay in the comfort of my own home, probably in my pajamas, and I'm going to make it that way. I'm not going to travel to the township building to use your kiosk to pay the same fee that I would have paid if I were at home. So we were hoping we would have answers to that question and a few others before tonight's meeting. But Candace, the representative that we were working with, she was on vacation last week, and I'm sure we all know what coming back from vacation looks like. She's still trying to dig out from the emails that she received while she was gone. So she is going to get back to us and let us know how that would change the level of efforts. So my concern is I can't really tell you what that kiosk cost would be on top of the 8,750 and whether or not it would even suit our needs. But my concern was if I don't ask for that now and we decide later that we want it, do we have to pay these implementation back-end configuration charges all over again? So it was kind of like, let's ask that now, because if that would be included in the configuration cost now and potentially save us money later, probably better to get those answers. Tonight, though, all I can speak to is the equipment, the configuration that's included in the swipe device and all of the work to the dashboard and the back-end processing that would happen. Okay. So, and also just to keep in mind, this would also allow permit customers to pay via credit card, but because that's not considered a utility, a fee would be levied on the people wishing to use credit card to pay those particular items or permit items. Township staff feels that moving forward with this upgrade accomplishes the following. It expands in-person payment options beyond writing a check for each bill in which the resident is here to pay, and it decreases the amount of time that it takes to process those transactions. We tried to do some metrics and figure out what exactly does that mean, how much time does that save, what does that equate to as far as money. Currently processing transactions for a customer paying all 3 utilities takes the cashier about 3.5 minutes. Our best guess is that that would cut that time in half, which is the potential savings of $9,100 per year. As far as the time that's spent on the back end, which would be one of the team members in the back that processes those credit card payments, and then the work that I do when it comes to me to be posted and transferred, we feel it decreases the amount of time spent processing online credit card batches and performing transfers in between those accounts also increases efficiency. We estimate that the time saved for that step is approximately 5 hours per week in total from the other employee that does the work before it comes to me, and then me, myself. And that total potential savings is just shy of $10,000 at $9,900. While this is not an expense that was planned for 2023, there are sufficient funds remaining in the 2023 IT budget to absorb this one-time cost. Should the board agree with the township staff that this is the best way to move forward in expanding credit card payment options to residents that prefer this method of payment, that is what our suggestion would be. And with that, pass it back over to you. And if you have any questions, I will certainly try to answer them.
Thank you for the presentation. Lots of good information. Certainly sounds like a win-win looking at the potential savings versus the cost to implement a swipe machine at the front. But bigger than that for me, it offers our residents an opportunity to pay with credit card, which is something I hear quite often. Why do I have to write 3 checks for all of my utility bills? Certainly would streamline the process here and make it easier for the residents. No additional cost to them. Savings on staff time. I think it's an excellent proposal, but I'll open up to the board.
My question, actually, you answered at the very end, is what would it save us in time? Because you said when you get them, when you have to break them all out, but if you did it with a credit card, you could specifically say water or sewer or refuge, and then you obviously broke this out with nicely here to say that. So, you know, a savings of about $19,000. I am correct in adding both together.
Yeah, you're adding both of those together to realize or to come to what we just as a guess.
Right, I understand.
Based on the time spent for this section that would be improved, and then the time spent for this section that would be improved. But yes, you're right. The total is
even if you're off a few bucks, you're still close.
Yeah, and that's an annual savings as opposed to the one-time cost of implementing.
Right,
this. Yeah.
exactly.
Fantastic.
Any additional costs year after year? Do you know of, or is it just the $87.50?
It's just the $87.50. So I did bring the email that I sent just so that you can get an idea of just how thorough we're trying to be with Paymentus to get an idea of certain fees. We've asked follow-up questions like, can you explain to us what happens if the EMV device fails? Whose responsibility is it to pay that? So, we are trying to think of this as, okay, what costs could we possibly incur in the future related not to the upgrade, right? Related to just wear and tear on a machine. Would they replace the machine for us? If it malfunctions, will they fix it? Will that come at a cost to us? So we are trying to ask those follow-up questions, and we are waiting for answers. I'm sure, though, respectfully, even if that were a few $100s, again, the amount that you're saving on an annual reoccurring basis being close to 19,000, still far outweighs, maybe a few $100s that we would spend a year to either upgrade equipment or to have our current equipment serviced. Again, I think the 8750 is what it is. The only thing we would also then need the board's opinion on is, do we wait and see what this kiosk amount costs? I don't know if that's going to be $1,000 or if that's going to be $3,000. What I do know is if there's a fee associated, I don't even want to have the conversation anymore. But best case scenario is we have clear direction on how to move forward so we can start all of that now and hopefully have something to be able to introduce to the taxpayers, in the first quarter of 24 that, I think would really be a great benefit to taxpayers.
Just one other comment on the credit cards. This would accept all major credit cards?
We asked that as well.
Not just specifically a Visa or
We
Mastercard?
asked that as well.
All of them?
Yeah, even though they cited a Visa regulation, the question was, does this cover all credit cards? So we're waiting for a response on that.
Do we know of any other municipality that's currently using this Paymentus swipe system?
I do not know of any other municipality that's using Paymentus and has a lobby swipe. I don't know the answer to that.
Is it possible, and would it be helpful for you to ask if they had someone that is a client in a municipality for reference, so that we might on the front end figure out some of the
I mean,
bugs?
I think a lot of people, so when we reached out months ago to, try and gauge the communities surrounding us on who pays this, is this a courtesy to your taxpayers? Who pays this? What I was finding is a lot of people do online payments, but there are not a lot of people that do swipe payments in the lobby. And I think that we just asked the right questions at the right time. And, to be able to offer that to the taxpayers, I think would be, really excellent.
Fantastic. Thank you. Commissioner Osborne.
Yeah, thank you. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. You look good.
Oh, I feel like I should be in a gym right now, but okay.
I have 3 questions. So you were talking in terms of credit cards. Would that also apply to debit cards?
Yes.
Okay, same fee structure?
Or non, yes.
Or, okay. What is the fee for the use of a credit card if it's done at the convenience of your home?
I believe it's $2.90 some cents. So I'm going to just round that and say I believe it's approximately $3 for every $500. So if someone wanted to pay $800, they would go on, they would pay $500, they would realize that $3 fee, then they would go on and pay another $300, and they would be levied another $3 fee for that.
Okay. And we had a discussion about this several months ago. So let me just resurrect that question. The fee that would be charged for those who use the flexibility, if it's passed that way, is that fee paid by the person who is having the convenience of paying at home, or is that a cost that's going to be spread across all taxpayers?
Nothing changes. So if you are sitting in your living room looking to make that payment, you'll still be charged the same convenience fee that you would have always been charged.
Yeah, previously when we talked about this, we were discussing whether to
absorb that cost, and that's off the table.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments by the board? Public comment or question? Okay, excellent. Do you have what you need from us?
Yes, I do. So being as this was a direction and discussion, would the board like the township to move forward with exploring the option and paying the $8,750 with 2023 funds to upgrade the credit card system?
I'm certainly in agreement with that.
So one follow-up question to that is, if we receive information back from Paymentus relative to the kiosk, and the kiosk is not going to charge a convenience fee in our lobby, is there a yes if the equipment costs less than X amount of dollars, that you would want us to entertain a self-serve kiosk option?
That's a management question.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is look at this as two separate items, right? So let's get the $8,500 option implemented, and then we can come back and evaluate the kiosk, with the costs and whether it's warranted.
Okay, so I'll just wait until obviously I receive the answers to the questions that I don't know the answers to. But in the meantime, at the board's approval, we'll move forward with upgrading that process.
Fantastic.
I will say, in a perfect world, right, where the kiosk is determined by management and staff to be a cost-effective option, where the fees aren't passed on to the resident in the lobby, is that something the board would be inclined to support?
I would.
Okay.
Takes time away from the receptionist.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
streamline. Mhm.
So I think that gives us very good direction. Thank you.
Thank
The
you
only
all.
thing to just add one thing to add to that, and I know you briefly mentioned it, any maintenance or repairs or upgrades to said kiosk, if we're able to get that sort of information.
It's all,
You have already asked it.
It's all in my
Make sure
email
we-
that I was hoping
get
I would
that.
have answers to before coming before all of you tonight, but I just don't have those yet.
My other question, it's a minor one, but I wonder if consideration was given to have 2 swipe machines, because we've got permits now using swipe, and then you could have a line at the window for utility bills. Just
I think all options are on the table, bearing in mind, currently we have one actual cashier. So, unless there's an option to handle lobby overflow, right now 2 swipe machines wouldn't really help one person that's consummating those transactions.
very good. Thank you. All right, we have no old business tonight, courtesy of the floor. Opportunity again for a member of the public to address the board. Yes, sir. If you'd come forward, give us your name and address for the record.
I'm Don Sheetsley, 1411 Hampton Road. I want to thank you for your help with the mice. I did a follow-up with Eve. She checked the neighbors out and they said it's a lot better now due to cold weather. But she also noticed there's a big fat cat in the area.
Well, I can't take credit for the cat or the weather, so.
So leave the cat alone if that's what. Otherwise, thank you very much for your help. Also, we get a lot of feedback on the leaves and stuff. Most of the feedback I get is very good. So I think you all did a very responsive job to it. I get a lot of likes and stuff for people who say that you do a good job, and they know it's difficult. They wouldn't want to get the leaves with the way it is now, right, when they're still falling and stuff. So again, thank you, everybody. And thank you for all of you who bought wreaths from us and who might buy wreaths. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, many thanks to Public Works. We have a very dedicated crew who's got quite a job on their hands, especially right about now with all the leaves falling. So please pass the appreciation on to staff. Anyone else for courtesy? Is there anyone online? Okay. I need a motion to authorize payment of invoices and disbursements.
I'll make that motion.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. We have no executive session. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. This motion is adjourned. Everyone have a wonderful Thanksgiving.